The Trump administration is now escalating its fight against drug cartels. The Pentagon carried out yet another deadly strike on what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says was a boat carrying drugs off the coast of Venezuela without providing any evidence. Hegseth said the strike, which happened yesterday, killed 4 people. It is the 4th known U.S. attack against what the Trump administration says are narco-terrorists smuggling drugs. But the moves are also raising major red flags to some who say the Trump administration failed to provide any legal rationale for these strikes. Joining us now, former Army Captain Margaret Donovan. She is a former assistant U.S. attorney and Army lawyer who has deployed to Iraq and Syria. She is now in private practice and a visiting lecturer, at Yale Law School. No one better to talk to about the legality of this. Just give me a sense of how you read this from a legal vantage point. What authority does the president have to carry out strikes? But more importantly, when the administration is not providing any evidence, not briefing members of Congress, not seeking specific authorization, and using this kind of ambiguous term, narco-terrorists, to kind of sneak it into the broader war on terror, which has its own legal problems. What do you make of all of this?
Sure. I mean, I think the answer is actually quite simple. He has no domestic or international legal authority to conduct these strikes. And when you don't have domestic or international legal authority to conduct these types of strikes, what you are doing is murdering people. And that is a real problem. I think, to your point about labeling these individuals narco-terrorists, it seems like somebody is advising Hegseth or the president that if you call these groups domestic terrorist organizations, suddenly you're allowed to kill them wherever they are. That is not true. That is not an authority that you get when you designate somebody or a group of people as a terrorist organization. So what you're left with is just unauthorized killing, and that could leave people subject to criminal prosecution in the United States or a court-martial, depending on, who is actually clearing these airstrikes.
Could you talk about that a bit, about the process? You were a JAG officer in Iraq and Syria. Can you talk about the process that goes into authorizing one of these strikes on an enemy combatant, which these are not defined as enemy combatants, they are narco-terrorists?
Yeah, of course.
Narco-traffickers, rather.
So first of all, before you even go on a combat deployment, you go through training. You learn the rules of engagement. You learn about something called a declared hostile force, right? So you have something or a group of people, an entity that is engaged in armed hostilities against the United States. And you learn about when and where and how you can engage that enemy. And so when you actually go into country and we're working in a strike cell, for example, I worked in one in Baghdad and I worked in one in Syria. You're in basically a centralized room where there are a lot of different people that are involved in a strike. You have somebody who's maybe clearing airspace. You have somebody who's giving you intelligence. You have somebody who's talking to either the unmanned aerial vehicle operators, the drone operators, or the aircraft. And then you have a lawyer and a strike authority, the person who's actually authorizing that strike, right? So there's a lot of analysis going into a strike before you actually execute. But the upshot of all of that is that you are there based on international authority or domestic authority to be engaged in hostilities in that country, right? That is your legal cover for conducting airstrikes. And you don't have that here, right? You have sort of this patchwork of what I think the administration thinks is legal authority, calling something a domestic terror organization, saying that somebody's a narco-terrorist, but that's not actually authority. And
the Trump administration is appealing a decision by a federal judge in Oregon temporarily blocking the deployment of 200 National Guard troops to Portland. Last night, U.S. District Judge Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, delivered a setback for Trump's attempts to use military troops in some Democratic-run cities. Immergut wrote in her ruling that Trump's attempts to federalize the National Guard, absent constitutional authority, undermines the sovereign interests of Oregon. Quote, "This historical tradition boils down to a simple proposition. This is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law." Defendants have made a range of arguments that, if accepted, risks blurring the line between civil and military federal power to the detriment of this nation. Joining us now is Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield. Attorney General Rayfield, thank you very much for coming to the weekend. Just first and foremost, your reaction to the judge's ruling last night.
I mean, it's a big win for democracy. It's a big win for all of us. Effectively puts, a marker down for the president, letting him know that he can't base his decisions or his facts when he wants to deploy the United States military in our cities on social media or the gossip that he hears in the world. You got to have real facts. And when you don't, we're going to hold the line in court.
A.G. Rayfield, I want to get your response also to Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who is kind of leading on a lot of this. His portfolio is growing every day. A social media post he made on Saturday about this. He called it legal insurrection. The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, not an Oregon judge. Portland and Oregon law enforcement, at the direction of local leaders, have refused to aid ICE officers facing relentless terrorist assault and threats to life. There are more local law enforcement officers in Oregon than there are guns and badges in the FBI nationwide. This is an organized terrorist attack on the federal government and its officers, and the deployment of troops is an absolute necessity to defend our personnel, our laws, our government, public order, and the republic itself. One, fact check him. There are a lot of claims that he made in there. But also, and most importantly, what do you think the purpose of this language is? Legal insurrection and talking as if, your city is in the middle of a civil war.
This is the silliest thing that I've heard. I mean, this is a guy that is using inflammatory language, which appears the only purpose that I can surmise is they want to normalize the use of the American military in our cities. It's absurd. We were in court with real facts talking about how this facility had turned down help from the local police in the most recent month. It bears no resemblance to anything that these folks are saying on Twitter or whatever streaming platform that they're using. So it's a little bit strange. But again, I mean, this is the kind of the norm that's coming out of this presidency. The most wild thing for people to think about, you think about your courts of law as places where facts would reign supreme. But the lawyers for the federal government were coming in there quoting Truth Social. That's just bizarre. And it was confusing the judge. You're coming into a courtroom and your facts are based off of social media. But that's the norm that this president has established. It's incredibly dangerous. And that's why this ruling was very important. It's like, no, President, when you want to put the U.S. military on the streets, you got to use real facts and just not your gut feelings.
Attorney General, it's great to have the opportunity to speak with you on the heels of this breaking news. We appreciate it. But I want to go a little bit into sort of the legal process. Pardon me for sort of being pedantic about it. But the ruling today, I think, sort of on the heels of the news in Chicago, where the National Guard is being deployed, sort of makes me wonder why Portland was able to get ahead of the news. You filed a lawsuit on September 28th, but cities like Chicago haven't been able to act legally or in such a nimble way. Can you sort of walk us through how this came to fruition and what the thinking was behind closed doors and why Portland seems to be ahead of the curve here?
Yeah, and I would look across this country and the trend that is going on. We first saw this trend in California, then it was Washington, D.C., it was Memphis. They were already talking about Illinois, and we started getting rumblings in Oregon that this may occur. And so my instruction to our attorneys were, as soon as we get notice that orders have been given in formalizing this process, I wanted to be in court within 12 hours.
Not martial law. Defendants have made a range of arguments that, if accepted, risk blurring the line between civil and military federal power to the detriment of this nation.
It's almost like she's a real conservative.
That, which was going to be my next point. This was a Trump-appointed Judge Ankush. What do you make of this ruling? And is the Trump administration going to send National Guard to Portland anyways?
I don't think they'll do it anyways. We'll see, because they've generally respected these initial preliminary rulings and gone through the appeals process on this issue. What I make of it, I mean, this is not the first time a judge has reached this conclusion at this stage. We saw this in L.A., actually. There was a very, very early challenge filed in front of Judge Breyer. He issued a somewhat similar ruling as this judge did, saying there's no rebellion here, there's no threat of a rebellion, and the government is able to execute its federal laws adequately, which are the sort of the core legal standards that are relevant here. He eventually got reversed by the Ninth Circuit, which said he had not given the administration sufficient deference on their sort of assessment of the situation. So we've kind of seen this play out before. I do think this decision is on sturdier ground. You can see that the judge made an effort to really sort of put on some sort of belts and suspenders that Breyer may not have been able to at that point in the procedure. But, you know, it'll go up on appeal. There's a couple weeks that it's in place pending that appeal. And I would expect, or at least hope, that the Trump administration will obey the ruling in the meantime.
Ankush, if I remember the reporting right, the administration is going to appeal to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit has a reputation of being the liberal circuit court. Should the administration expect a ruling to go against them, or is there a possibility that the Ninth Circuit, again, known as being a liberal circuit, actually side with the president in this?
Yeah, there is a possibility. I mean, to some people's surprise, including my own, the Ninth Circuit reversed Judge Breyer on that first early ruling, basically saying he hadn't had a sufficient factual record at that time. Now, you can see this judge made an effort to fix that issue by soliciting a lot of declarations and evidence at this point to the extent that she could. So it is very possible, actually, the Ninth Circuit could end up reversing a decision like this. The theory that the circuit used at that time, the three-judge panel, was effectively that the president is entitled to an extraordinary amount of deference on these sorts of questions about military standing and the execution of federal laws. I question now whether a panel looking at the same issue now, given the months that have passed and the ways in which the administration has behaved in the meantime, would extend that same level of deference to the administration at this point in time, and we'll see.
We have the Attorney General of Oregon coming on later on, just in a little bit, so y'all pay attention to that. But I want to move to Chicago for just a little bit, Sam, because we found out about these 300 National Guardsmen from the governor's social post on X, right? Yeah. Saying that the president of the United States had sent him a letter saying that he was nationalizing the National Guard. When you look at kind of the loggerheads that ends up happening when these governors say we don't need this, and more importantly, they say that it's a show. It is a show of force. It's trying to get the American people used to.
So, folks, it's no wonder that Trump is being hit by all these military scandals right now. This is what we warned would happen when he picked Pete Hegseth. When he picked Pete Hegseth, this was going to happen because not only did Hegseth support some of these just ideologically far-right positions, you know, renaming it to the Department of War, honoring some of the worst moments in American history going back to the 1800s. He was basically saying that he would allow Trump, or at least he wouldn't stop Trump from potentially using military force against citizens. All of these things, right? Beyond all that, he was just unqualified. He did not have qualifications for this job. Did not belong in cabinet. He was a weekend Fox host. Wasn't even one of the big ones, right? Wasn't even one of the big names. Was not qualified. Remember all the rumors, at least, about his drinking problems, his major issues with alcohol that have been happening over the years, videos of him drunk in all of this. The rumor was that it was such a big barrier to his nomination that he allegedly said, I'll stop drinking if I get the job. Like, this is a man that's not up to snuff. And this was there. We saw it all. Remember the leaked messages about war plans, which endanger not only America, but its allies and everyone. And so it's no surprise that you have him just blowing ships up, insulting generals, and now being the head of a defense operation that is sending people into cities, but it's not even clear they have the legality to do it. When you pick clowns, Donald, your cabinet will always be a circus.